Hello everyone and Merry Christmas. If you're watching this just after it's gone up, then that means Christmas has probably just been and gone and you're now in that period between Christmas and New Year's. Ever since I've been on social media, I've always been interested in making content around New Year's and New Year's resolutions. I find it a really interesting time because a lot of people are really skeptical about New Year's and a lot of other people are very enthusiastic about New Year's. So when we have these periods of time that we associate with a fresh start, such as New Year's or Mondays, those time periods have a really powerful effect on us and our belief that we can make a change. And if you can harness that enthusiasm and that self-belief in these periods, you can do very well. However, if there's no structure or planning or a deeper level of thought gone into your goal setting during that time, then when that fresh start feeling wears off, we can often find ourselves lost and we drop off the bandwagon. And of course, people take the lesson from this that the New Year's resolution thing is nonsense, there's no point, you shouldn't bother. But unfortunately, like I said earlier, I think that's a bit of a misunderstanding. Likewise, those people that get really enthusiastic about the period, I think they misunderstand it as well because, as I said, they fail to do the deeper work to continue the progress they've started once that New Year's fresh start motivation runs out, because eventually it will. It always does, and you need to have something in place to keep you going when it runs out. I often think of it like an airplane. So an airplane takes a lot of energy to get off the ground. This is like the New Year's period where the plane, really speeds up and, starts to lift off the floor and takes off into the air. And once the plane is in the air, it can't just switch the engines off. There has to be more work done to keep that plane in the air and moving and heading in the right direction. Likewise, with your New Year's resolutions, you can't just have this big run up and then switch off. You have to keep going and you have to try and find, it's not just about your motivation and your willpower, it is about having some good plans and some good thought processes in place. Anyway, I'm not really going to dive much more into that today. That's just my kind of viewpoint on New Year's resolutions. What that does mean is that I do like to plan at the beginning of the year what my goals are going to be. I don't really plan anything that's going to, revolutionize all of my behaviors or these very binary choices of that I'm going to quit this thing or, master this thing. But what I do like to set are some fitness goals of things I'm going to work towards in the New Year period. So today I'm going to focus on some fitness goals that I have for the New Year, for 2024. And then a little bit later this week, I will upload a second video just so I'm not talking about myself for like 20 minutes all in one go, because I probably will end up doing that. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 goals that I have for my lower body training. I'll start with the first goal, which is the most exciting one, which is that in the year 2024, I'm going to train to try and get a 200 kilo deadlift. Now, if you are someone that is really passionate about your strength training, then deadlifting 200 kilos may not sound like a big deal to you. In some of the gyms where I've worked, there are, dozens of people there that can deadlift 200 kilos, very strong people. However, I've spent most of my life where most of my training has been dedicated towards kickboxing. And even the strength training that I've done my own strength training for over a decade, but the program was always based around kickboxing performance. And so the amount of really dedicated time I gave towards, deadlift blocks is actually quite rare. And although I wouldn't consider myself a novice, I do think there's a lot of potential for me to make progress just by consistently deadlifting in program after program for a long period of time. Some context, my best ever deadlift was 160 kilos. That was about 6 years ago now, and I was weighing maybe 5 to 10 kilos less. So that makes it sound like quite an ambitious goal. That's 40 kilos to gain on my deadlift in a year, or about 10 kilos every 3 months. However, there are some caveats there that I think make this maybe a slightly smaller task than it sounds by those numbers. Like I say, that was about 6 years ago. I've done a lot of strength training since then. And also now I am a bit heavier. And as they say, weight moves weight. As long as you are still training, if you get heavier and you're still strength training at the same time, then your potential to produce force and lift weights should probably go up. I've been back on deadlifts for about the last 2 months at this point. And last week, just in the course of regular training with no deloads, no tapers, anything like that, I was deadlifting 150 kilos relatively straightforwardly. So that is about 10 kilos off of my old max. And for context, when I deadlifted 160 kilos, in training, I think the most I had done was about 140. So, when we taper down and we deload and we get ourselves really psyched up to max out, we usually put a bit more on the bar as well. So I think I'm pretty confident right now that I could deadlift more than 160 kilos under really fresh circumstances. So that already shortens the gap a little bit. And I just know that people watching this, they're going to be split probably between people who think maybe I can do it and other people who may think this is a really ambitious goal. And it definitely is. It is a goal where I think there are enough variables and enough kind of potential training avenues that are untapped at the moment that I do think I can continue to make progress with the deadlift. And yes, it is ambitious, but I'm really going to go for it this year. Now, how I'm going to do that at the moment doesn't involve anything that magical. I'm not going to do any crazy training splits where I'm doing 3 deadlift variations a week. I'm not going to do really kind of complex set and rep schemes and intensity schemes, although, as time goes on, I may start to use some more advanced techniques. But for the way things currently are, my deadlift is progressing week to week, just on a kind of linear progression where I just add a bit of weight each week and change the reps either up or down to kind of move around that. So I'm just going to stay with that, and I'm just going to be patient. And if that weight starts to stall, or if I find there's like a really common sticking point or a problem that keeps cropping up, then I might add in specific accessory exercises that will help me work on specific problems. But that does probably mean I'm going to be deadlifting every week and then using accessory exercises on other days, things like Romanian deadlifts, some direct glute and lower back work, and I'll be talking a bit more about some of that later. And kind of just keeping my other lifts in the background while that's going on and not trying to lift every exercise and increase every exercise at the same time. So deadlifts are my main focus for this year. Very exciting. Secondly, I'd like to try and get my back squat up to 120 kilos. Now, I have a real love-hate relationship with back squats. I don't think my build is best suited to the movement. I'm 6'5", I've got very long legs. But I've always wanted to be better at the back squat. And I think if I stick at it long enough, like what I was saying about the deadlift, if I give myself like a long time of being dedicated to the back squat, then I think I can make that progress. I wrote in a recent blog about how one of my biggest mistakes in my own training is probably changing variations of exercises too frequently. And I feel like I often get to a point with back squats where I build myself up to around my old max, and then I back off, or I change to front squats, or I change to safety bar squats. And although that should kind of still translate over and still help me build strength, I think when I do that, I also reduce the weight a little bit as well to get used to the new movement. Or like I say, maybe I go for speed squats where I'm going for lighter weight and trying to drive up quickly, or I just take time away from squatting movements altogether, which, I can justify that in relation to my strength and conditioning training, but if I want to get better at squats, that's something that's going to have to change. For some context, I did back squat 110 kilos around about the same time ago that I did my 160 kilo deadlift. The first time I attempted 110 kilos on back squat was like a friendly powerlifting competition, just like a thing at the club I was training at the time. And when I asked for 110 kilos to be put on the bar, the person who was kind of calling out what weights needed to go on the bar accidentally looked at the column for 120 kilos and read out those plates, which meant the loaders put 120 kilos on the bar, and I unracked the bar and went down into the bottom of my squat and got absolutely buried because obviously it was 20 kilos over what I knew I could do at the time. So since that day, I've always said that although I have this love-hate relationship with back squats, if I could get that 120 kilo squat, I'd be happy. And then I could, work on all the other variations under the sun and build leg strength in other ways. So those are 2 really clear goals. Obviously, they're very objective goals. I can look at those and, I know what my motivations are. I know why I'm invested in those. And it's a very clear explanation of whether I get that or not, because I'll either lift those weights or I won't lift those weights. The next goal for my lower body, and the last one we're going to talk about in detail, is a bit more vague. And vague goals are always something to be wary about, because we say these things like, I'm going to try and sleep more, I'm going to try and drink more water, and they're not very clearly defined, unless you're actually measuring those things regularly and, charting your progress over time. And unless you also know how you're going to make those changes, what routines are you going to put into place, what actions are you going to commit to, then it's very hard to keep those goals in a meaningful way. And that's why, when it gets to New Year's resolution time and someone says they want to be healthier or exercise more, I find those to be, almost like red flags, because they're so vague and they're so undefined that those are the kind of goals that people will fall off the bandwagon with, because there's nothing concrete there at all. But with all that said, I do have one, very vague goal, as I say, and that is to do more single leg work in my training. So I am one of those people that preaches all day long about the benefits of single leg training. All my clients do single leg work. I'm always talking about making sure you do your accessory exercises and you continue to do all the work surrounding your main lifts. And then I'm that person that will occasionally forget to do split squats, or, I will, not put many single leg variations in my program. And that's something I need to get over and commit to, because there is a lot of value there, especially for someone like me who is fairly hip dominant. Sometimes single leg exercises will be a better option for me to do like a knee dominant movement. So a lot of split squat and lunge variations, it's easier for me to work through the knees than it is like with a big compound lift. And alternatively, with some other single leg variations, that will give me more opportunities to focus on the glutes, which, as I said, will kind of feed into some of my accessory work for the deadlifts, because I know that when my glutes feel strong and I can really drive my hips through into the top of the deadlift, that's when I feel strongest with my deadlift. So this is why goal setting and accurate goal setting is so important, because I now pretty much already have like a bit of a rough idea of what most of my lower body training is going to look like for 2024. I know that I'm going to concentrate on the back squat and the conventional deadlift throughout most of the year. And obviously I will have to kind of modify intensity and set some reps at different periods, but I know those exercises are going to be in the program. I know that at certain periods, I'm also going to be working on single leg strength and glute strength. And at other periods, I might give more of a focus towards deadlift accessory work and direct lower back work. And then with that, later in the year, I might get more specialized into some, specific position work for the deadlift if I think that's necessary. Alongside that, I will still want to keep up with some plyometrics, maybe even some Olympic lifting variations at very, specific points in the program. I'm not just going to try and throw everything in at once. So that pretty much gives me the mainstay of my lower body training for 2024. Make sure you check in later in the week where I'll be talking about my upper body goals and some kind of other goals that I have around that. And if you want to keep update with my progress in 2024 and learn more about my training and my advice for you if you're getting into your training as well, then please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share, all the usual stuff. Just really help me build this channel. Thanks a lot, have a great time off, and I will see you again soon.